without a recording secretary tonight, so
really?
patient. Okay, I think we're ready to go.
Running late or not? Running late or not?
There's nothing. Other than the consent.
No, there actually isn't.
We are ready. Got a recording. Okay, call to order the Committee of the Whole for Tuesday, September 17th, 2019. We do not have a recording secretary tonight, but everybody's here, so that makes it really easy. All 14 of us are present, and we are being recorded, so that's how she's going to get the information. Okay. Next up is the reminder to please speak into the microphone for the BATV recording. And number 3 will be items to be removed, added, or changed. Do we have anything? No. Okay. We'll move right on to matters from the public for items not on the agenda. Okay, so if we have nothing there, we'll move immediately then to the consent agenda. The consent agenda reads as follows. Would be A, Committee of the Whole Executive Session Minutes for August 2018.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Chanzit, second by Knopp. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, that makes that easy. All right, then we'll move on to number 6, which is a presentation from PACE by Doug Sullivan and Martin Sandoval. Welcome, Doug.
Good evening, Chairman Wolf and members of the council. Thank you for having us this evening. I'm Doug Sullivan with PACE, the Suburban Public Transit Agency. First, really quickly, I want to just let everybody know about my Batavia Bonafides. On Saturday, I attended my Batavia High School 25th year reunion. Alderman Chanzit, I'll catch you up afterwards. And I'm also wearing my Batavia Bulldog socks. I didn't get the jersey memo, but the socks are my contribution. Okay.
Some people did.
So a few months ago, the city staff contacted PACE about exploring some transportation options, especially to the local metro stations. And Marty and I met with city staff soon after that, and we discussed mainly a concept of a park and ride, which I think I'll let you know makes sense in a couple of different scenarios. One, when there is a lack of parking at a metro station, like there is in Naperville, or 2, when there's very expensive parking at a destination. For instance, PACE has a number of park and rides that serve express routes to places like the Central Business District in Chicago or Soldier Field, Wrigley Field, etc., places where parking is very expensive. So that's when we believe the concept of a park and ride makes a lot of sense. And I can tell you that I don't think those scenarios are really present here. For instance, would someone from Batavia drive from their home to a park and ride to then get on a bus, which costs $2, and then take that bus to the train station, when the alternative is to just simply drive to the train station, pay that same $2, and save themselves the in-between stop? So, of course, PACE would love it if the answer to that question was yes. We're, of course, in the business of reducing the number of people who are driving and increasing the number of people who are using public transportation. But, certainly the scenario I described would necessitate, number one, the creation of a new PACE route that doesn't exist today, and perhaps an optimistic assumption about how many people would use such a thing. So, however, there is a public transit service already in place, which is called the Batavia On Demand service, which does travel to the Geneva train station from this zone in Batavia. So let me tell you a couple things about this service. I think you all have a brochure in front of you. It costs $2 per ride, same as our fixed bus routes. It's open to the general public, so anyone can ride it. It's a reservation-based service, which means it mostly does not operate on a fixed schedule. It goes to whatever destination to pick people up and drop people off. It can pick people up or drop them off from any location in this zone. You can see the map of the zone right here. There is sort of one somewhat unique thing about this particular service compared to some of the other PACE on-demand services, which is that this one has two timed runs, two Fermilab from the train station in the morning, and then from Fermilab back to the train station in the evening. In fact, 3 of those in the evening. So it runs from 6:30 a.m. to 6:50 p.m., which, as you can imagine, does limit its usability for, evenings out, people who work odd shifts, people who would want to travel on the weekends. PACE and city staff did discuss a couple of opportunities, perhaps, as it relates to this on-demand service. Certainly an expansion of that service to later in the evening or perhaps on weekends is within the realm of possibility. That would require funding from some source. PACE wouldn't really see necessarily the need right now to expand that service based on its current ridership, but if new information were to come available, we would certainly be willing to consider that, especially if resources were to come along with that. And then I think more importantly, or perhaps shorter term, we discussed some expanded promotions of that service. We certainly want to promote it and want to encourage as many people as possible to ride it. I know you have a number of senior living facilities here in Batavia that would be a great fit for this kind of service. We can promote it to those. The Neighbors magazine is one that we're already working with the city on. And you may have also noticed that there are a number of bus stop signs around town at some key locations that advertise this service. We could certainly place more of those. That's an easy thing to do if you have suggestions on good places for those to be placed. The other thing about the Batavia On Demand service is that it can be booked online with only 1 hour's notice. So it's in a way, kind of our version of an Uber or Lyft ride. It's perhaps not as immediate as an Uber or Lyft is, as you can see, but of course it only costs $2, so it's still a very competitive service if you're traveling within this zone. And a brand new announcement is that there also will be an on-demand app released hopefully very shortly. We're in the testing phase of that app now. So, perhaps within a few weeks or months that will be ready for public distribution. So let me also introduce Marty Sandoval here, my colleague from PACE, who's the liaison to the city and is here with me. So we can help answer any questions about this service or about the needs that you see in Batavia, or to help you in the future in any way we can. So with that, I'll open it up to questions or comments.
Anybody have any questions, comments? Dan?
So I have a Ventra card. I know how to get one. How would a Batavia resident easily get a Ventra card?
Couple ways you can get one. One is the Ventra website. 2 is a vending machine. The closest one of those is at the Aurora train station. But even more convenient, perhaps, are local retailers. Jewel Osco is one. CVS stores are another where you can get a Ventra card at any of those. I think there are literally hundreds around the suburbs where you can get that Ventra card. And of course, that's the best way to pay for this on-demand service.
And then you had mentioned that there would be costs associated with expansion. Any idea what it would cost roughly to expand to a weekend schedule?
I don't have that off the top of my head. We'd have to figure out, kind of what the hours of operation would be. So I'm sorry, I'm not armed with that today, but we can certainly follow up with you.
And the expectation is it would not probably be covered just by fares. It would probably require a city contribution of some kind.
Right.
Yeah.
Certainly this service does not recover anywhere near 100% of its expenses. the taxpayer subsidy that we within the RTA family receive covers the lion's share of that cost, with fares covering, a relatively small portion. So, yeah, certainly I think any expansion beyond its current hours of operation and zone boundaries would probably require a city contribution.
Abby?
How has ridership been since you launched the on-demand?
So these on-demand services are, their goal really is to provide coverage in an area. So I don't mean to, well, I'll take a roundabout way to answering your question. The service has, the ridership has been growing, so that's the good news. It started small, and it's still not a tremendous number. However, it is growing. That's the good news. But I think the way we at Pace, philosophically see this type of service as compared to a fixed bus route that runs up and down the street is that this provides coverage in an area that doesn't have a lot of fixed bus route service. So people who really need public transit can get it, as opposed to what you might call typical mass transit, which is a huge number of people all traveling down one corridor, where the numbers are, make that kind of service really a lot more cost effective. So.
Do you have other zones like this?
Yes, there are 11 of these on-demand services. One is in St. Charles and Geneva. There's two in Aurora actually, and then a couple more in Lake County, Will County as well, and even Northwest Cook County. So.
Hey Doug, have you found, say, people in the apartments, have they been using it?
I don't have that information off the top of my head, but Mark, you don't happen to know, do you?
We have our community outreach team, and we have done some presentations at so definitely ridership in these senior facilities. If they're not using on demand, using other programs like riding cane or ADA transit. But back to what the ridership is on average, anywhere from riders.
We need to have you use a microphone so we can get this broadcast on TV, so thank you.
Sorry about that. So on average, there's about 42 daily riderships on average on a daily basis. And again, we have done mass outreach, and it's on a case by case. Sometimes we reach out, or the senior facilities reach out to us, and we do presentations. But if they're not using on-demand service, they are also using other programs such as riding cane, and also our ADA prayer transit service. So it's a case-by-case basis.
So I guess it's, maybe I was meaning the Batavia apartments and the folks in the subsidized housing. I mean, I think it's a great program for these people to get to the train station to get employment. I mean, so their access to employment. So
Definitely.
have they been, utilizing this?
That we have had, and maybe that'll be a great resource. If the city could connect us with all the apartments, we'll be more than happy to go in there and set up a couple open houses and talk to the residents. Definitely, there is a barrier sometimes just within the region, that just getting in the door is the hard part, and they have every right, because it's the residents in the building and the association. Mm-hmm. So they want to be very careful who walks in, but of course, with the help of the city, we'll be more than happy to do a big mass outreach.
Anybody else? Mark?
Do you see the potential of a program like this expanding, where you're crossing more of the city boundaries? I mean, you mentioned St. Charles and Geneva, and Aurora has a couple, but they're all very small. Do you see a way to allow people to go further?
So, yes, that's the purpose of that Ride and Cane program, which is a separate PACE program but serves the entire county. gets at that very issue, that we want to be crossing or allowing the riders to be crossing those jurisdictional boundaries to travel throughout the county. This particular service is set up in a relatively small zone because of the fact that you only need to reserve this trip an hour in advance. So the geographic boundary is designed to allow that vehicle to get back kind of to any place within less than an hour in order to pick somebody up with that kind of frequency or with that little of notice. For instance, that ride-in cane program requires a reservation a day in advance, which isn't as convenient, obviously, but has some advantages in terms of how far you can go. So that's the trade-off.
Dan?
Can we get a crate of these? I'm off on Tuesdays. I'd be happy to go around to the apartment complexes and the high-density housing in my neighborhood. Elliot and I are going to be at the Homestead for a presentation. We're there twice a year as it is. It'd be nice to drop these off and talk about it with the residents. Happy to do that.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah,
And
I'll take
thank you.
some. I've got a thing at the Batavia Apartments. That stuff.
Doug, I was wondering if you could just provide a little bit of information about your rideshare program as well.
So, PACE has what we call our van pool program, which allows groups of between 5 and even up to 15 people to group together on their own, and PACE provides the van that they use to commute to work. So maybe if you know that, if you work far away and you have got some coworkers who live nearby, you can partner up together. One of you becomes the driver, and that person goes for free, and the others pay a monthly fee, which covers the fuel, maintenance, insurance, and tolls for the van. So it's a great program for places, again, kind of like this, where there's not a whole lot of fixed bus route service and not necessarily a lot of demand for everybody going in one particular corridor. But if you get smaller groups of people, it can still reduce the number of cars on the road by grouping them into a van and having that vehicle be your form of micro transit, if you will. So PACE has actually one of the largest van pool programs in the country. There's about 700 or 800 of those driving around the suburbs every day. So it's been a great program for lower population density areas.
Do they get to use the emergency lanes on like Stevenson as well?
HOV lanes.
I'm sorry to report that's only for our regular buses, but we're extremely excited about that. That's been perhaps PACE's most successful development ever. When the state law changed in 2011 to allow a PACE bus to use the shoulder of the Stevenson Expressway, the ridership has grown sevenfold in that corridor. We keep expanding service again. The buses get overcrowded, we expand again. The buses get overcrowded, we expand again. The park and ride lots get overcrowded, we try to expand those. I could go on and on about how amazing that's been, but it really shows that when public transit is competitive with the automobile, people will choose it because it's obviously easier than driving and way cheaper than driving. And when it's just as fast or faster, it becomes such a no-brainer. So that's the top of the line. So
Just to clarify, the on-demand, that's for anybody.
correct, general public.
And, I mean, it doesn't serve my ward, but say somebody in an alderman in Ward 1 wanted to get down to Oktoberfest to volunteer some time. He can call.
It's not all of Ward 1, unfortunately.
It's not? Well, enough. So he can call and get a ride there.
Definitely, yes.
Theoretically.
But if he stays out past 6:50 p.m., then he
We're
needs
good
to
then.
ride home.
All good.
Take the early shift.
Abby?
Just in general, in terms of bus ridership, is there something we can be doing to help you increase your fare or ridership? There's something we could be doing with our bus stops or something we could be doing with the infrastructure around that, or aside from just getting the word out, what's something we could do?
I think one thing that we talk about a lot at PACE is land use and pedestrian infrastructure. So for instance, I can tell you out on Randall Road, we, back 5 or 6 years ago, invested quite a bit of money, PACE did, in the pedestrian infrastructure along Randall. Those bus stop shelters and little connecting sidewalks are pretty new. And of course, we thought that would really help ridership, and it hasn't, to be honest with you, unfortunately. So certainly the pedestrian infrastructure helps, because before that, if you wanted to ride a bus on Randall, you'd be standing in a ditch in the grass, and no one wants to do that, especially if you have a choice between driving and taking the bus. So the pedestrian infrastructure absolutely helps. We as PACE spend considerable resources on that, but of course we can't build sidewalk networks for a community. But land use is a really big part of it too, because you see on Randall Road, the distances between where somebody might be walking and their job, or where they go to shop, and especially if you make multiple stops in your day along Randall, that's a real challenge, and so more greater density of land use is something that we certainly favor, and maybe even slightly more strategic decisions about how to develop certain properties that make sure a bus can get access to, say, a shopping center, or maybe setting a building closer to a street and having parking be behind the building instead of in front, which essentially nobody does. But that makes a huge difference to someone who's a pedestrian and wants to walk from a bus stop to shop or work. Anything else you can think of to add to that? Okay.
Okay, anybody else?
But thank you for asking that question. We appreciate that.
Thank you for coming and
Okay.
giving us the info. We'll try and
All
help
right.
get people to the buses.
All right. A crate of these will be on their way.
Excellent. Thank you, guys.
We will share them. Thank you. Okay, next up is a presentation on the recommended improvements to enhance the safety of walking and biking in downtown Batavia, part of our strategic action plan.
Okay, while the screen is refreshing here, this is one of the major objectives of our strategic action plan, is to take a look at ways that we can improve the safety of people as they travel by various modes of transportation in our downtown area, whether they're walking or they're biking or they're in their vehicle. We want everyone to be safe. And with the coming of One Washington Place being built in our downtown, and nearly 200 units of residential living going in there, we can expect that we're going to have at least possibly 400 more people who are going to be downtown residents. So I think we're looking at this at a particularly good time to get out in front of this. There was a great group of people sitting around the table to strategize and identify the areas where people come into conflict when they're traveling on these various modes of transportation, including Alderman Beck, who has been very active in the concern of making our downtown more walkable and bikeable and attractive to people who want to use those modes of transportation to come downtown to engage in all the great activities that we have down here, to shop and to visit various places of entertainment. We also were very glad to have the help of our Bicycle Commission had always had several people at the meetings, as well as our Main Street organization and the Chamber of Commerce, and numerous different departments from within the city of Batavia, including the police department, the fire department, public works, and community development, and also economic development. So there were a lot of us around the table. And the first thing we did when we got together was to determine what type of path did we want to take on this project, because it just could be all over the place. And what we determined to do was a working meeting where we broke off into 4 different groups, and taking a look at the map of our downtown, we took a period of time to highlight where those areas where people end up coming into conflict in those modes of transportation. I switched gears for the second half of the meeting to identify potential recommendations on how to alleviate those concerns in those areas. I'm happy to say that I think there's a half a dozen out of the 20 to 25 areas that I will show you that positive change has already occurred to make those a safer place. But we certainly do have a number of other areas where the resolution is attainable without a great deal of expenditure. Yay. But there are a couple of items on there that I look at as pretty big ticket items that we realize, and like so many of the things that we have in our strategic action plan, we just have to figure out a way and a timeline, a way to pay for those things and a timeline within which we're going to accomplish them. So with that, I'll start with the first area, which is Batavia Avenue and Wilson Street. There is a problem that cars that are turning right from the westbound Wilson Street are the pedestrians that are traveling on the north side of that intersection as they start from the east and go to the west are invisible to the cars. I think maybe the next picture shows it a little bit better. I mean, if you were standing out in front of that orange cone there, you don't see them, right? This is one that I'm happy to say that we have already created a solution for, both here and at another intersection that I will show you on Wilson Street, where we ordered super large signs, which they don't look super large in these photographs because I'm not a very good photographer, but what you see in the top left-hand side of that screen, the yield to pedestrian sign, but as well as you approach that intersection heading westbound, there is also on the lamp post that's right next to the road, a big, huge white sign that alerts people that there may be people in the crosswalk going around the corner there. This was a suggestion that came from one of the local property owner in the immediate area, Mary Marconi. She had seen so many conflicts of people trying to cross that street, herself included, and she brought this up to us, and we were able to complete that earlier this year. Okay, this is the east side bike path that connects the connection that is south of Wilson Street. It goes through a parking lot right now, but the good news is that the Park District realizes that this is an issue, and they have plans to route people along Webster Street instead of having their bike route come through the middle of that parking lot. So again, this is something that is in progress, but we're pretty confident that we're going to be able to accomplish this year. Along the way, if you have questions about any particular area, might as well stop while we're on that particular slide, so just let me know if you have a question.
So I do have a question.
Yes.
So Webster, and you're just gonna get up to River Street, and then, I mean, when I've gone that way, it's usually because I'm continuing on the path, and it's the easier way to get to River Street and keep going north.
Right.
To get on the path. So what are they going to do when they get to River Street from Webster?
At that particular junction is one of the areas, and we can add this to the list, where pedestrians and bicyclists share the pathway there, because when you go through the parking lot, you are directed to the sidewalk on the west side of the street as you head up to that crosswalk that then takes you across to the east side of North River Street. So we know this is a pretty complicated intersection to traverse, but I do think that putting people on the Webster as a roadway versus people could be traveling in all directions in the parking lot and visibility is not the greatest, is an improvement, but we're not all the way there.
Because then
I guess-
once you're on North River, you've got two ways of bike traffic and pedestrians sharing this one sidewalk.
Yes.
I guess I want to bring up the fact that we have pathway that's there that, I don't know how many months out of the year it's underwater, but there is a pathway there that we have to figure a way to use that pathway for what it was originally designed to. If that means build a deck on it, move the railings up, whatever we have to do, we have to figure out where the high water mark is and get that path up to that point so we use what was originally designed there. I mean, the whole idea of having that built alongside the river was to give the bicyclists an easy way to get underneath the bridge and get around a very difficult corner.
Can you put composite down over that?
I think that there's probably a couple of different kinds of solutions. I'm sure concrete could go in there, but I'm sure that's the most expensive solution. But I think that that's something that maybe we have to talk to the Park District about and figure out how we fix that and not just move people somewhere else and add them to other traffic areas, whether it be pedestrian cars, and put them into other situations, but fix what's there so we use it the way it was originally designed for. I really don't like the fact that we have that there and we can't use it. Dan?
To add from our walk that we just had down that corridor,
Yes.
has there been any progress towards consolidation of property or just discussing that in general? Because we as a group could probably do something
Yes.
with this whole corridor. There could be more bike racks there. All kinds of stuff could happen there.
Yes.
Yes, Keenan?
We were talking about going down that path that goes underwater there a couple months out of the year. One of the reasons I don't use it a whole lot is because once you get to the other side of the bridge, you've got kids in a trailer. It's really hard. So
I got a slide for that.
I think we talked about it a little bit about
Yes.
whatever development happens over there contributing to something going up.
Right.
I think that would help.
Absolutely.
Your
Right, but
Your
I
thought
think
of getting it
regardless
up.
of it, that
Yeah.
part of it has to be changed, and if that's going to require some planning, some money, some time, we need to start talking about it now, or it will never happen.
yeah, little baby steps.
Yep.
All right. Moving on to, this was one of the most complicated areas. The problem is that, and we're talking about First Street and Water Street here. This is the view going eastbound as you head through the north-south of Water Street there. Big hill we're coming down as we head into that, and it's on an angle, so you kind of, if there's somebody crossing, you see them at the last minute. We have not had a lot of incidents there, but all you have to do is stand on the corner, and you can imagine how it would happen.
Well, going the other way too, just because my office used to be right down there.
Yes.
People going west,
Yeah.
they will accelerate into that turn onto water. And I've seen where people are getting out, they're parked on the side there on water and they're getting out and they've almost been hit.
Yes. So, it's an awkward configuration. The curbs there are not ADA compliant. There is no crosswalk on the east side of that intersection. It's kind of a spot the issues kind of intersection.
Kind of screams out for a streetscape, doesn't it?
Thank you. So the next slide, while it is possible, one of the things that was suggested was making this a one-way westbound street. I think the current best thoughts of urban planning today tell you that you don't want to put one-way streets in your downtown. Therefore, the other consideration is that you've got the Chase Bank property, which is currently for sale. And you have another property just north of that, which is also for sale. So the only thing that isn't for sale, that isn't vacant on the entire block, is the dry cleaners. So I could foresee that, some redevelopment might happen on that block in the near future, and that would offer us an opportunity to do the streetscape that Alderman O'Brien is talking about.
It's too much money, I would imagine, but if just to vision that intersection, I mean, if we were to make some purchases with a streetscape both ways, I mean, we could make that kind of like a square with the Woolnorth design where we could, people walking and congregating and traffic can still flow through, but it's a city way that it would, we can control the traffic, keep it at 15 miles an hour like on River Street, and it becomes a whole shared square.
Ways of calming the traffic, because there are things happening there, and it gives people a visual reason to slow down.
And one thing to remember, just so everybody knows, or if everybody doesn't know, that street also carries the crosstown water main. So there's a lot of infrastructure right at that intersection.
Which would be perfect for pavers, because you can always pull them up if you had to access it, and then put the pavers back, and no one knew we did any work at all.
Another challenge in this area is that work needs to be done on the private property located on the southeast corner. The reason why you've got an 8-inch curb at that corner is to direct the water around that property. If you were to make the types of depressions that you have in accessible streets, modern streets, that water will pour right into the property. So that's something that needs to be engineered as part of this. This is one of the more complicated areas that we'll really need to discuss at length. Yeah. Alderman Beck?
I've spent a lot of time on this corner, talking to the Water Street Studios and stuff like that about, trying to get more attention to Water Street and to Kiss the Sky there and make it safer. And I used to cross that all the time with my kids. The turn radiuses, when you look at the overhead on those curves, are so, no, not sharp. What's the opposite of sharp?
Wide angle.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was like, words.
Oblique.
Words are not coming. Sounds like, are so wide to accommodate trucks at one point. The distance you have to cross and how it'll be clear when you start, and then there's a car zooming down the hill as soon as you're halfway through, is really terrifying. To tighten that up, and if there's a way to temporarily and quick, cheap to tighten up those corners, would go so far to make that so much more comfortable, because it would force drivers to go slower around the curves. It would create a shorter distance for pedestrians to have to traverse. Because my original thought, the whole Activate the Alley conversations with Danny started when I approached her about how do we get, this was years ago, how do we get a intersection mural like you see in Portland and Austin and places like that.
Downtown roundabout.
Or downtown roundabout, yeah.
Do a roundabout there. It's probably wide enough that you could probably do something like that.
There's something cool we can do there, even if we could do it temporarily until, development comes in and does the rest. Like, if there was something that we could just do to slow people down and get people's attention would be.
I feel really bad talking about this without Gary here.
Yes.
Or an engineer.
I will. I guess I have to represent for the MUTCD.
Abby and I have talked about it. However, if everybody remembers what Abby's talking about, our streets department does. Every winter, they park all the snow there, and it becomes where the snow is every part where Abby's saying that the crosswalk is, it is obscured by the snow. and people get obscured by the snowbank. So the concern that I have, when we're talking about the MTUD is we're already kind of not following that by all the snow gets put there most of the winter. And I've seen it time and again. I've seen people that pop out from behind the snowbank, and when you actually look, they've been in the intersection for several feet, like Abby's saying.
Well, I think this is one where it deserves to be a discussion on a future COW agenda all by itself, because it is one of those complex issues. And like you say, Gary should be part of that discussion, and Bill Kellum and Scott Haynes too, I would invite to participate.
Why are they not here tonight?
Gary is at Prairie State today. This is the intersection of East Wilson and South River Street. It was a similar situation. Instead of a blind right turn, it's a blind left turn that people who are making the left-hand turn in the northbound lane of South River Street tend not to see people stepping off of the curb who are heading from the south to the north side of the street to go to North River Street. And so we increased the signage in the area, and it seems to have been an improvement there. Yes.
Oh, are you still on it? Okay.
Uh-huh.
Because I had a question on the first one too. Is there a way to enhance both of those, where if a pedestrian's coming by and they press the beg button, that on 31, if like a light flashed above the sign that said pedestrians may be there. I don't drive a lot, but when I have driven up Wilson Street, I saw the sign when I was walking once, but I have never seen it while I'm driving. Like, I've never noticed it as a driver. So to have, if somebody's there, for that to activate a light up there, and same here, or even if somebody is crossing, to get a walk-only pedestrian symbol until they've crossed, and then the green light goes. Because right now the green left-hand turn goes at the same time you get a walk person.
Well, one of the things that I saw tonight, just on my way here, was when people that are going to go west and that light turns yellow, they will get out into the intersection, and then traffic will be backed up on Wilson, and then they'll get caught in there, and then people trying to cross, they're blind. They can't see what's going on. That becomes a real issue. So I don't know if there's something where we say do not block intersection, or if we can adjust the timing of the lights, or I mean, obviously that's a bigger deal. But the fact is, I see it all the time where you get 2 or 3 cars hanging out there in the middle of the intersection, so people can't go left onto a river, and it's just it can get ugly.
This intersection has always been interesting in the fact that why is there, where all the parking is, natural walking path would be on the east side of the intersection. There's no crosswalk. And I know they've said because it's an IDOT road and this, but it doesn't make sense to make, for safety, make pedestrians park over on this corner, walk across one street, cross another street. That's more time that they're out in traffic, and those are longer crosswalks than what would naturally align with the existing intersection structure.
And I think it's a matter of dumping somebody out mid-block as opposed to at a corner.
But it doesn't, it's one of those, when you look at it.
But I remember having this discussion when we talked about the jog, and part of it was an IDOT input into why it happened, and I think we just kind of got shot down on, we wanted it there. We wanted the crosswalk at that location, at the far east side of that.
Because the light, the white line, again, just on my way tonight, I actually took a picture of Oak and Swine through my sunroof as I was sitting there. I was first in line, and that walk actually lines up perfectly right there. And for those new stores that are going to be on that block, to be able to take advantage of that parking across the street, that nobody uses, and it's always been an issue. So, but in order to encourage that, that'd be great to be able to have that there.
I can see if IDOT is more flexible today than they were the last time that we asked about that. But again, that is a state route, so it's nothing that the city of Batavia really has control over except to ask nicely.
And we had to do that to get what we have out there now.
Bring a couple of dozen of women with their baby carriages saying, hey, we need to cross the street. IDOT
Got you.
Or have IDOT park in that parking lot at 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon
And
and
try and
try
cross
to
the
walk
street.
across the street to the restaurant.
Yeah, have them meet us over there.
The meeting right
Tell
now.
them they have to go way down there to go right there.
Or 10 a.m. and try to get to the farmer's market on a Saturday
Yeah.
morning.
Come see what we're facing before you just say no.
Your Honor, you were next.
Yeah, let me just introduce a brief history lesson here as to why this is and why this all happened. It was my great-grandfather who built a store on that corner in 1880. And he and another gentleman by the name of Myron Kenny built a combination drugstore and food store on that corner. And my great-grandfather was the pharmacist. Now, when the building was built, it lined up directly across the street from what is now going to be 36 Cypress, or 6 plus Cypress. The buildings on the south side of Wilson Street extended further west into what is today the road. The road wasn't there. The River Street was there, but it was a very narrow, basically one-lane road that came off of Wilson and went kind of down a hill there because the stores were up. And so the stores were there for many years. And then when Alderman Brown's father was mayor, we started having the development on the southeast side as far as industrial, American Can, and all those businesses down there. And they suddenly got all kinds of heavy-duty truck traffic. So then IDOT came in and said, well, we need to widen this intersection out. And so basically in 1976, the city of Batavia and IDOT bought all those buildings on the south side of the street, of which it ended up being my great-grandfather's store, another store that was just like his, building was just like his right next to it, and then there was a third building that had been a barber shop for many years. They all came down. I have pictures of all this I could show you, but at one point, the road lined up perfectly, but what we're dealing with over there now is kind of a reaction to history or recreation of history, because to widen the intersection out so you could have turn lanes going south on River Street, they had to take all those stores out of there, and when they did it, they constantly then had to move the crosswalk to a different direction because the stores aren't there to be directly across the street from each other as they used to be. So now you got that parking lot that's halfway up the hill there, and that's the east end of where all these stores were. So, I mean, the stores, so that's a much rebuilt and reconfigured intersection than what it ever was to begin with. And, you know, you're playing around with history here because, as they said in 1880, when all this was being done, the automobile wasn't on the street of Batavia. There was, you know, I have pictures of it with horse hitching posts up and down the Wilson Street Hill, and everybody rode their horse and wagon down there, or just their horse, and tied their horse up, and the horses stood there, and there wasn't anything to scare them. So it was, we are dealing, you know, in downtown Batavia, and almost everything Laura's brought up here tonight, there's a history lesson behind each one of these as to why they are. I would suggest that the corner that Alderman Becca's spending a lot of time on over there at Water and First Street is kind of the same thing. Some things happened there that kind of reconfigured things and did things differently than what was originally the original plan there. So there's been a lot of different stuff happening here, and it's just basically we're living in a reaction to history with what we're doing here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's make new history.
I mean, it's fine, but I'm just saying that that's why it is the way it is.
And another thing that we're contending with at this intersection is that based upon the traffic study that was done in conjunction with the one Washington Place, this is the worst intersection in town. And so it's a pinch point for traffic. So to the extent that things back up all the way through Batavia Avenue is related to this being a pinch point for traffic as well. So it becomes really hard to balance all of the issues.
Elliot, so I guess I'm going to kind of piggyback on an early one, but also with that one. I mean, we do have other spots along 25 where there's at least striping for a crosswalk. I mean, you've got, if I'm just looking at an aerial map here, you've got State Street on the north side, you've got, when you get down to Wilson on the north side of that intersection where the T intersection of 25 hits, you've got stripe for a crosswalk there. But to the notion of when, 1 North Washington becomes a reality, you're going to have potentially a very limited visibility there as you're coming south on 25, looking to the to the west, right? And just because of the sheer, as you're coming down that stretch there.
And
but
there's
you
no
also
turn when pedestrians are present.
Understood.
At that intersection.
Understood. But if you've got a green light, I'm just saying the visibility is blocked by a 4-story building.
And a 10-foot sidewalk. So it'll be set back 10 feet from the curb.
So where I'm going with this, though, is that not only do you have a building there, but you also have something that's probably going to come in on the south of that, where Washington and Wilson is, that would be southeast corner of that T intersection. And my guess is it's going to be something that wants to get a lot of pedestrian traffic from 1 North Washington. So I would definitely entertain revisiting with IDOT what we can do to encourage more crosswalk activity.
I think they may be inclined to do that at the light at Washington and at the light at Washington where the jog is. I'd say the east side of the jog. Probably they would be amenable to putting a crosswalk in on that side of the intersection.
I think we're probably, to speak for everyone, but as Marty said, looking more for Wilson and River Street, South River Street. Right at the light. I mean, cause a stop there. If you have a crosswalk there, to walk in front of the stop
To the
signs.
mid-block?
Yeah, not mid-block, right at that corner. That goes into.
Maybe
6.
I'm not misunderstanding. So I'm seeing right now a crosswalk that is on the west side of South River Street.
Right.
And it heads to the east side of
Attaboy,
North River
Marty,
Street.
right there.
So that's the front of a building. So that's what I mean by mid-block.
Okay, yes. But it's not the corner.
Okay.
Mid-block on one side of the street, and it's on the east side of the
east side of the
street on the
intersection.
other,
Yes,
other
yes,
side
yeah.
of Wilson. And that's the issue I think
I think
we're
I
talking about.
understand.
And like I said, I think, going back in my memory, that was one of the things that was brought up during the jog project, was if that actually occurred, then you would make those crosswalks, a couple of them 100 feet long, to get across a reconfigured Route 25.
And that's where I keep going. When I look at something like this type of intersection, if we design the intersection for cars, we're going to get more cars. If we design the intersection for more pedestrians, we're going to get more pedestrians.
And I think that our design capacity is limited by the fact that the state is going to control here, but certainly we can have conversations with them to see if,
Right, that's understood. That's what we're,
Right?
that's what we're
And,
asking.
and that's what I think we need
Can
to
do.
do, is make sure we get IDOT in here and not messages back and forth with them, but actually get IDOT in here to talk about this.
And I think that
I think of probably, the typical approach to this is for staff to go meet with IDOT at their offices in Schaumburg and sit down and have that conversation. And then we certainly can, after we've had those conversations, if the answer is an absolute no, we can invite them
Yes.
to attend a council meeting.
I think it also goes to, from a traffic perspective, another just reframing the conversation with them is, we know we have an underutilized parking lot that's there that people could be parking in there and walking across the intersection rather than having the intersection blocked with traffic while they're trying to get more parking over on River Street, which is going to be less and less.
Just
So-
for the record, I do park in the parking lot and cross 2 crosswalks, and I still walk less than parking at Jewel and grabbing a gallon of milk. So I think that does need to be pointed out.
I do too, but it's still, the fact that you and I are using it, and when we're parking there,
It's
we
still
can
empty.
get parking all the time, it's underutilized.
Right,
Yeah.
I wish you'd all stop talking about it, because I really like parking there every day.
Sorry to
There's
give
always
that
a
up.
parking space there.
Exactly.
But as long as we're talking, I take pictures of parking lots, and I've even seen it during the farmer's market where there's lots of spots available in that parking spot. So as long as we're talking about it, and this is not the focus of tonight's meeting, but maybe there is a more productive use for that land being in a pretty good spot now with new development going around it. Maybe we subdivide that into a smaller lot. and put some street frontage development there. Just plant that seed out there. Get
All
some
right.
tax revenue up.
So the direction here is for staff to make a case to IDOT to allow the crosswalk to be on the east side of that intersection, right?
Right.
Right, because if you're in, to me, if you're in the block from the bridge to North River Street, you can cross in the middle, even if you have to go back to the crosswalk and go over. That's easier than it is to go up and go across the longer crosswalk at the intersection.
I mean, as I said, the crosswalk used to be there. It was
Right.
removed when the buildings on the south side of the street were tore down.
Does it make sense while talking with IDOT? I mean, we did this on 31, obviously, to get the other pedestrian crosswalks to kind of conform to our streetscape design of the paver crosswalks.
I would just be happy
So
if
I
they would
think
agree
that
to
the
a crosswalk.
design of
I agree,
these,
but since we're already
so
there.
the design of these is our design. So we had to get the design approved for what's there from IDOT. So are you asking for a different design
No,
to
I'm
it?
saying the pavers that are there, instead of just striping like we have at the T intersection of 25 heading south into Wilson, turning that into the pavers that we have for the crosswalks throughout the rest of downtown.
When you're saying 25, you're referring to Washington Street?
On the north end, yes.
Okay,
On the south end,
I
River
think that's
Street
where I
as
was
well.
getting confused because both of them are 25 because of the jog.
And realize those aren't pavers. That's just
Yeah, that's
The
stamped.
paver-
asphalt. Yeah.
Excuse me.
Well, because it lasts a lot longer
Yes.
on a heavily traveled street like that.
But they should allow it since
They have
they have 31.
Exactly.
and- Right. Just for consistency, it kind of frames the downtown better.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess are we also asking mid-block on the further west on Wilson, which would be ours at that point, right? Just west of where your photo is,
So
to go from
where would that
Verita-
go?
From Verita across to roughly the bank.
I think that really would make that a blind crossing.
Yeah, that. I think that's one of the reasons it's at where it's at right now, is because then it makes it very difficult for somebody turning left.
Because the
Going
bank is
north
so
up
close to the
25.
curb there.
You can't see anything coming across there if somebody was crossing there. And I think that's why IDOT made us move it over to the other side.
Yeah. Okay, Main Street and South Batavia Avenue. This one's so easy. There is a curb on the northwest corner. It's double curb that's stairs. That's not very traversable for some people. So the good news is that this project has already been approved and funded, and with the Main Street reconstruction project, we're going to eliminate this problem, and all of those corners will be accessible. This one might be a little bit controversial. The Mid-Block Crosswalk that's in front of Fultos. So many times, and myself included, I actually did not realize that a pedestrian had begun to cross because there was so much going on at rush hour, and they were heading forth with confidence. And it scared me to death how easily it would have been for my car to hit that person. I think that, can you correct me if I am wrong, that this was an experiment, that we wanted to see if it was going to work?
All I can tell you is I agree with you in the fact that unless you know intimately what's going on downtown as you're going through,
You don't expect it.
you don't expect it. You just don't, because there is so much going on. And it's happened to me where, I mean, it just has. And then you get people out of the goodness of their heart that are stopping, and other people aren't paying attention to that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's dangerous. It really is.
I would suggest an experiment is a good way to describe what happened there.
Okay.
I still like it.
I also think it did exactly what it's supposed to do. Is it's supposed to slow people down, going down Wilson Street.
I remember being very controversial, but I remember saying the point of this was traffic calming, and it's definitely calm traffic.
And this is not the only place
I was not
either.
calm
You go
after
just a little
the-
bit further
Well,
west on Wilson.
Driver maybe not.
By the McDonald's, and you've got another one.
And I guess I'll fight for this one because I think this is one that needs to be downtown there. And if it goes away, it makes the other ones even harder to use because people will not slow down then. And we can't legislate people to watch what they're doing or to pay attention while they're driving. They have to learn that. It's just like putting up a new stop sign somewhere. People have to realize it's there and they have to stop.
The sight lines are different on the east side versus the one in front of the McDonald's, I think. The one at the McDonald's, you can see, you can see it a little bit easier. The one going on the east side is a little more difficult to see. And it's a little more, everything's a little more closed in. There's more things going on over there. There's cars parked right there. And it's harder to see. I agree with you. People need to be able to get across. All I'm saying is the reality is that it's tough.
And the one up here, I think, is harder to go through or harder to use because there's 3 lanes of traffic going each way. Right. With a left-hand turn lane going either way at that one. So you have to pay attention.
So does this one create more of a problem? Because unlike the others, including the one just west on Wilson, this one is not stamped red to jump out on the street like the rest of them.
That's what I was going to say. I think this one's
Maybe we have to enhance
lack
our
of
experiment.
visibility because you have some dirty white stripes out there that it doesn't draw your attention to it. You've got the sign out there, so you're kind of like, what's going on? And if you do any searches from, one of the ones that I'm familiar with is in Fort Lauderdale on Los Olas. They made this, what you're saying, the pedestrian were prioritized, and it's bright green intersections. I'm sure you can see it from here. That your eyes are drawn to it, so this is not a road. There is something you start to visually anticipate crossing.
And I guess the other
And that's an easy fix.
I mean, a traffic study would also let us know. I mean, that is a ridiculously long left turn lane. I mean, I don't think that when I drive down, I don't see that many cars stacked up turning left onto River. So that's part of the problem too.
Well,
it is 3 lanes.
that's going to change when Washington Place is built. So I don't know that I would say let's shrink that before we build an apartment building.
The other piece on here is the parking, goes pretty close to where that crosswalk is to make it cuts into the visibility line. Is it, right where the curb starts to come out for the little peninsulas there.
If there's a minivan parked right there, you don't see it.
Absolutely.
So if I may, to Marty's point, I think we as a council need to come together and agree upon that, we need to make all of downtown pedestrian friendly. And this is, I hope, what we're doing.
That's the purpose of this exercise.
So, that people are able to walk safely, as we always say, to journey through the downtown.
I think one of the reasons why that left turn lane is so long is because of the impact of stacking there. That if those who are traveling eastbound are waiting for somebody to get into the left-hand turn lane, that again compounds that backing up traffic to Batavia Avenue.
Is there a problem with the stacking though? Because you can't actually make a left turn until it's clear, and it's never really clear. So you just have more and more people stacking because there is no left turn arrow. You have a left turn arrow.
A left turn arrow will detract from the cars traveling westbound. That'll take time off of that.
There's that, but going west, you do have an arrow going that way as well.
Right.
What I'm saying is those who are progressing straight through the intersection will have time taken off for those who are turning left in front of them.
Could match the westbound left turn lane on the 25. So to me, there's dead time there if you're being able to make a left-hand turn on 25 on Wilson Street going west onto 25. That time that's spent with that left turn light should also be allowing people to make a left-hand turn on the North River from the eastbound Wilson. Again, we don't have control of those lights to reconfigure that.
But again, I think that this intersection is so important because we don't have one that goes across the street to Veritas. So you eliminate this, and now people are
Right.
Yeah.
now they're crossing the streets 3 times to get to Veritas.
Believe me,
Or
I
they're
don't think,
just all
I
gonna
don't think that's
jaywalk.
the solution.
They're gonna pop out
it-
between
it-
cars
it-
at, any willy-nilly space, so.
Well, in the practically tonight, again, had they had a green arrow to go left, they wouldn't have been able to go left because there was 2 cars sitting right out in the middle
Right.
of the intersection there.
And pick an intersection downtown, anytime from 3 to 6. People have a problem doing that. They get in the middle of the intersection isn't clear, and they go in it anyway. And it,
People enter the intersection and don't clear it?
so many times.
Can we just stand and do
please.
that at the end?
Can't make the turn on Friday nights anyway.
Chief, you don't have a problem with me doing that, do you? You wouldn't. If it would work. Penalty flags for everybody.
I even had a red challenge flag at home too.
Okay, another issue on Wilson Street are the incidents that have occurred between people leaving businesses and coming into conflict with people who are riding their bike down the sidewalk on Wilson Street. And it seemed pretty unanimous in the group that we were meeting with that we don't need people riding their bikes down Wilson Street on the sidewalk between Shumway and North Island and River Street. So the thought there is to paint markers into the sidewalk that ask people to dismount their bikes and walk them over the bridge.
Is this people crossing the bridge?
Yes,
Okay.
going over the bridge.
Well, I guess I'd have to say, I know it's a state route, but it is a downtown, and I just think a downtown, we should be looking to employ more shared roads.
And we do. If people do want to ride their bike, they should get into the lane with the traffic and ride their bike.
And so I would say that, that's a state route, I get that, but throughout our downtown, if there's city streets, they should be shared streets.
Yes.
We slow traffic down, and it's shared by bicyclists, pedestrians, and traffic. And it's just the way people have to go through the downtown in Batavia. That's how I see it.
So would you say don't dismount your bike on the sidewalk?
Going through downtown, probably not, but I wouldn't put them on the sidewalk.
We did
That's
have
what
the
we're
incident with a woman who was hit by a bicycle coming out of the dance studio.
I think that's the distinction. She's talking about dismount your bike.
Yeah, if you're on the sidewalk,
on the
yes,
sidewalk.
In the
absolutely.
street,
Okay.
right on.
So then you
Absolutely.
just become a pedestrian rolling a bike.
Yes.
No, I agree with that,
Okay.
absolutely.
Great.
I was almost hit by a bike coming out of Limestone. I was like, okay, come on. Don't hit me.
Especially don't spend
Okay,
money.
you're gonna see a theme here when we talk about crossing Batavia Avenue, and it has to do with the fact that much of these problems, this is very much a problem intersection for people to cross because the 2 lanes of traffic in either way. No signalization, no crosswalks here, but you have identified and asked staff to pursue a road diet for Route 31, and that would greatly increase our ability to enhance people's safety when they try to cross this intersection, which is one of the major ways that people come to our festivals and activities downtown.
Are we looking to do the road diet?
I sent a 3-page single-space letter to the Illinois Department of Transportation 2 weeks ago, asking them to please consider it and giving all of the reasons why, and saying that our city council was dedicated to fund the traffic study necessary as a precursor to considering putting a road diet in this area. And I said, even if the traffic counts don't they're too high for the current standard. I would like the opportunity to ask for a variance because of a number of considerations. The lanes are very substandard width on this road. We depend upon people being able to travel to our downtown for our economic vitality. We don't have a state route running through the middle of our downtown. So we depend on our own residents for economic vitality, and we need people to be able to get there safely.
So, because, I mean, it becomes a life safety issue again, because McKee Street's not working,
Right,
right? I believe the Bicycle Commission, always supported a
absolutely.
crosswalk on Houston. Okay, so if we could get the road diet,
Mhm.
it would benefit everyone. It would benefit the bicycles, the bicycle riders, it would benefit pedestrians. As it was said years ago by Gary, we were talking about streetscapes in their initial stages, that, Batavia Avenue is a moat.
Yes.
And we need to get that moat out, and we need to have people cross the street from the west to downtown.
Mhm.
And right now, it's not a safe condition.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Right.
Speaking of, Alderman
Alderman
Knopf?
Callahan brought up a good point with colors, and I noticed at Houston and 31, we've got the crosswalk that crosses Houston, and it's another one of those that's in red. Is that something we could just ask staff to do as standard policy, that any and all crosswalks downtown
It's
are
more
some-
so a matter of funding. So, it's,
So what-
it's,
for the is that, how big of a cost difference does that make to really put it out there that there's something here for somebody to watch what's going on? Draw attention to it so that
Visual cues.
it's not just looking for the person that happens to be walking, but the visual cue that there's something different in front of me,
Mhm.
that I think it would just make sense that it just makes all of them standard.
well, maybe what we should do is take a look at the aerial map of our downtown so we can see which crosswalks have already at the stamped concrete and which ones don't, so that you can determine what the scope of where you would like to put those. Alderman Miller?
Yeah, I was, last week I had met with Abby, and I know some of the other aldermen met together as well to talk about the streetscape plan. And what several of us and what I was going to start doing was, the streetscape plan had all of these intersections, had the red brick all around it, so that, like you said, it draws your eye to there's something happening here. We'll start talking about breaking this whole thing down by intersection, by sides of the street, to where, like, we should be knocking these things off one a year, or just seeing what we have in the budget to do those things, along with the infrastructure that we're already spending, so that we're getting somewhere. Instead of every 5 years, we're like, all right, look, we need to do this, and then another 5 years, we're back at looking at this picture again, and nothing's gotten done.
Mhm.
So a lot of us are trying to look at, putting a construction schedule together with estimated prices, so that we can put it into our budget, see what we have available to start knocking these things off once a year, every 2 years, if something's small enough, a couple of them a year. So we can start putting these together and moving along with our strategic plan from 20 years ago.
Just on what we talked tonight, it's one intersection at Washington and Wilson. That would be new, because that is one that would be 3 sides. We have the one on the east side of the intersection of 25 and Wilson, that new one that we would like to go in. The mid-block one in front of Fultos. Those are the only ones. So the ones that we're already discussing as problem
I've
areas.
heard that they also want the Houston too,
Yeah,
so
well,
that those aren't
and
the only ones.
There's one going across on Batavia.
Still getting to that one, but
Oh, okay.
as you go, the ones that we're talking about that are problem intersections, the common denominator is they don't have the red look. And if we consistently make it look the same, it's going to alleviate some of the concerns with.
I hear what you're saying, but actually I will disagree in that some of the red sidewalks are still the problem. Where I'm talking about the blind turn, the blind left turn, that's a stamped sidewalk. The one that I'm talking about at 31 and Wilson Street and Batavia Avenue in front of All Occasions, that's a stamped crosswalk. So it doesn't cure all problems, but it certainly makes them more visible.
That one at the Anderson building has much more unique factors than, but I would say you take that red crosswalk out of there and put something else in there, you would have made it much worse to begin with. So the blind corner for that intersection already exists. We can't get rid of the building.
Mm-hmm.
And if we did not have that red intersection there, I think it would be more problems.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Batavia Avenue and McKee Street, again, I don't think I need to go through how many ways that this intersection is problematic. We've covered that in several meetings. But there's just an example of the traffic that goes through there, and we have resolved to pursue a road diet for Route 31, which will reduce the number of lanes and also offers us the opportunity to put areas of refuge for pedestrians who are crossing the street.
Back to that, not that I want to necessarily point it out to IDOT, but that is a mid-block crossing that obviously they approved there, so.
Yes.
I'm afraid to point it out because then they'll take it away.
Right.
but-
Yeah, right. Well,
But they approved it.
and one of the things that was told to us from IDOT is that they would not allow crosswalks or signalized crosswalks on 4-lane highways. But yet, on Route 38, from the river in Geneva all the way out to, I think it's 7th Street, there are unsignalized crosswalks across every intersection in the same district.
So one of the reasons why I think that this crosswalk is here is because it did have the rapid flashing rectangular beacon on it that was destroyed 2 years ago. I don't know that they would allow a crosswalk to be put across without that type of additional signalization. This
That's
is
what
in a,
Ellen just said that they have, so.
well,
They wouldn't, and
I'm saying today. So I don't know when those were constructed, but a lot of times they don't rip out things when they make a new standard. They just leave it in what was approved in the past as their regulations
it
change.
used to be striped.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've worked there for 35 years at that corner. It used to have stripes on both sides of the street on Houston across 31. So they can't say they never allowed it.
Right. And I don't know that they would even take the position that they never
Right.
allowed
They
it.
just won't allow it today.
Right.
After the repave, they just painted it. Right? Yeah.
Okay, so this was an area where the North River Street from Wilson Street to State Street, you were like, am I still on the river path? I have no idea, but this is something our street department was on a commission with the Forest Preserve District, and this was a signage project, and this was a stretch where they did add additional signage. So you'll see the maroon and gold Fox River Trail signage on the street indicating where people can go. Union Street, entrance to Pamarco Industry. People come down Union and they're like, well, I want to head to the north on the bike path, but which one of these is where I should go? And so we have added additional signage this year to indicate which direction is private property and which direction it is to continue on the trail.
Let me go back.
Yes.
I know in the strategic plan we looked at from a while ago, there were discussions about moving the bike trail from where it is cutting through on the west side of the treatment plant to the east side of the treatment plant along the river.
Yes.
Is that something we may be pursuing at some point? Because
it's a good question. So what happened when that was raised was, so Trotter and Associates is who we use to design our what we did at the wastewater treatment plant. And so we hired them at the cost of, I think, about $30,000 to do some modeling to determine how to put a path on the east side of the treatment plant. And their cost estimate for that project was $5 million because of the need to build up the shore. And it's going to be of the nature of that cantilevered path that is adjacent to North River Street. So it's a very expensive proposition. But that being said, there are grant programs out there that if you can make the argument that this is somehow going to alleviate congestion, then there are CMEC grants and ITEP grants that, but the thing is, then you have to have a shovel-ready project. So you're going to have to invest in the phase one engineering, and that's, on a $5 million project, that probably already is I don't know, would you estimate a couple $100,000 to do the phase one engineering on a project like that? So it's like,
So we're talking
we got to
about
pick the right time to go for
extremely
it.
long-term.
Right? Yeah, I think.
Part of riverbank stabilization and preservation of the river is to be able to do that and stabilize and combine the two projects and be able to hopefully be able to come up with some money for both of them.
Right.
And there's a lot of ways to skin this cat too. I think one of them is to also, work with our state rep, with Corinna Villa, and talk to her about the benefit of being able to extend that down the river like that. I know she's very pro-river.
Absolutely.
I talked to her a few weeks ago about, what St. Charles is doing, and having a vision for the entire waterway from Algonquin, down through Yorkville.
Oswego, yeah.
Yeah, and she got excited about it. So I think that's another thing. If we can tie in to that and somehow and discuss this as one waterway, and one economic corridor, an ecotourism corridor.
That's the conversation that we're having.
You're reframing the discussion a bit to make it more regional than just Batavia.
Right.
I mean, the reality of the moment, however, is that the state of the state's finances is about as bad as it's ever been. So anybody that believes that there's going to be a pot of money that's going to fund this in the near term, I wish I didn't disagree with you, but I don't believe it's going to happen.
I don't think we need money for talking to her, because some of the things we might want to talk with her about getting IDOT approval on. Her office is in downtown. She might want pedestrians coming to be her constituents to visit her.
Well, I mean, that stuff's fine, but, talking about doing a big thing on the river, I'm all for it, but I don't see it unless we want to pass a referendum ourselves and ask people to pay for it.
Alderman Beck?
I can remember, and I may not have it right, but I feel like on one of my architectural river tours in Chicago, I remember them talking about and calling out the river walk that they have along the banks now, and that had been built over the years as a requirement for all development along the river. They had to build their section of the river walk. So I don't know how much, we could put that, not that there's a lot of development space on our river left, but
there's a slide for that.
Oh, great.
There is. It's coming up. But yeah, we will definitely look for public-private partnership in order to accomplish some of these goals. Paperboy Alley, the problem is that it could be used to access the path under Wilson Street Bridge, but not many people realize it's there. But I don't think that improving the signage to ask people to use it is really to the advantage. I took this picture to demonstrate that it's probably not our best side. It's kind of a lot of dumpsters are in that alley, and it's privately owned as well. So we probably should not be directing
It's very narrow, too.
traffic there. What?
It's very narrow.
Yes.
You've got a trailer with kids in it. It's hard to turn.
Yes.
We approved a gate 2 years ago that we still haven't built there. To close it off.
So the gate's approved, and that will be part of the budget to determine whether we want to fund that, to put that in next year. It's not in this year's budget. Here is where we talk about public-private partnership. You're biking down the trail, you're headed north on the east side, and you use this beautiful path that goes under the bridge, and then stairs. And then if you're pulling a burley behind your bike, I can't imagine what you do to traverse that. So it's not very bike friendly at that point. What our hope is, by acquiring the Larson Becker properties, is that temporarily, it's going to be used as a parking asset while we have to take down our current public parking in that area to build a 350-space public parking garage. Once that comes online and it demonstrates that it can handle the parking necessary for the area, we hope that we will very quickly thereafter see redevelopment on the former Larson Becker site to include a public-private partnership to extend the bike path north and eliminate the need for these stairs, except if you wanted to park your bike in a bike rack and head upstairs to spend some dough on North River Street, then feel free.
Didn't the mayor bring up that, naming that after?
It's already been done.
Yeah, there's a space set aside for that.
But there's no space for this bike path now? It's all parking?
There's a space.
There's a space there now, I thought.
We maximized the number of parking spaces that we could put in there, given the grade. So when you look at the grade that's left on the western edge of that parking lot, it is just a steep cliff.
Okay.
Alderman
Definitely
Meitzler?
would love to see the bike path continue north on the east side of the river there, but that's obviously a longer term play that's going to take many, 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 many years to get fully realized. Could something like the bridges that go over Lakeshore Drive downtown Chicago, the ramps that go out and then double back, that are specifically for bicyclists and runners, could something like that exist here to help alleviate the stairs for bicyclists, to allow them to stay on their cycles, but still not take 10 years to get into reality? I don't know the costs on
Or $1
such
million.
bridge. I don't know the costs on such a bridge, but that is a way.
Maybe you
that
could send me
take shorter time.
a picture
Sure.
of what you're talking about, and I can forward that
Yep.
to the engineering department to see what their thoughts are on that.
Laura, cheaper
Yes.
than $1 million is a bicycle access ramp, which is just a little metal piece that goes up the stairs, and you just roll your bike up with you as you walk.
It's supposed to be there.
Bikefixation.com sells them. I saw them at a trade show once. I can't imagine they're super expensive.
The center of that staircase is
Sounds
supposed
good.
to be designed for that.
It's
Because
just
I
a
think when it
little
was first
too
went in,
skinny.
that's when my kids
I've
were little,
tried.
and it didn't have a railing in it.
In
the center, and you could-
Railing, yeah, then it would work.
Because unfortunately, I lost control of it going down at one time.
And that's why we have a railing.
Probably.
But I'll definitely look into the bicycle access ramp from bikefixation.com.
Yeah, that's really cool, Abby.
Yes. Then there is the path behind the city building that's on Shumway. I didn't really know how to describe this. It's when you cross over from the east side to the west side over Clark Island, and then you head north. There is a path that's in behind those buildings. Kluber Architecture is there. This is the alley that's behind Limestone Coffee. There is a lovely consignment shop back there. But as you can see, when you get to the end of that path, again, you're met with stairs. It's going to be a similar situation that as we're able to do riverbank stabilization and maybe as future development happens on the north side of Wilson Street, that perhaps we'll be able to continue that path on that side as well.
And that's why when we did the bridge, we really thought about putting the 4 staircases in down each corner of that. Because we knew if we didn't do it then, we wouldn't be doing it now.
Right.
And we wouldn't be connecting to anything.
Right.
So it was really important to do those 4 at that point.
Okay, and here's another one that we were able to make progress on this year in May during Bike Week or Bike Month, Bike Week or Bike Month. But the problem was that once you come off of the pedestrian and bicycle bridge and you get to North Island Street, people are confused about whether they should be using the sidewalk or if they should be going in the street. We felt that for those riders who are not street riders and maybe have children along with them, that utilizing the sidewalk from this area up to Wilson Street, if they wanted to cross there, is probably fine. But we wanted to give people more confidence to use the road and also to give alert to drivers who would be using that road with bicyclists to be cautious. And so this is the very first area of our downtown, all the way from the wastewater treatment plant, all the way up to City Hall. There are sharrows installed in either way, which is a image of a bicycle with chevrons on the top and bottom of the bicycle. We like to use those in some other areas too. In a few slides, you'll see Water Street from Houston Street to Union Street. That's the next place we'd like to utilize those sharrows. This refers to the sidewalk that's on the east side of North Batavia Avenue between McKee and Houston Street. So you're crossing from the west side to the east side, and this sidewalk is very narrow. Pedestrians use it all the time, but so do bicyclists. And so you have a lot of conflict there. But it's yet another problem that could be solved by having a road diet, in that we would be able to identify bike lanes on either side of the road.
And going back to Marty's point, just looking at that crosswalk right there, the visual cue of having the red with the white stripes on there is so much more significant to drivers. Because that's barely noticeable, right? I mean, and
I think this is the standard that IDOT has, or MUTCD, or whatever it is.
Right.
That's what they do when they have the flashing crossing.
But I know that to your point is there's some intersections where that the red doesn't necessarily matter. I think the more consistent you can be with your visual cues of where those crossings are, the better. And and I think that's a case of, especially during the daytime anyway, where it will really pop off.
And then we have the Storehenge bike rack that's at Wilson. It's great having a bike rack there because there are a lot of people who are utilizing their bike in this area. But I'm not sure this picture quite does it justice, but you're way up high here. So one member of our team that we had looking at this came up with the clever idea to just install a slide that you could use to go down it. No, so that's kind of a tongue-in-cheek, but there should be some direction, or maybe those bike racks aren't in exactly the right place to be convenient to folks who are parking there, so that they could get a delicious ice cream or a taco, or visit an antique store, or get a great hot dog.
Put stairs there?
There's stairs to the
Well,
right, 20 yards.
Strollers.
Yeah,
You're going to the ice cream shop with your kid full of strollers, so you're not leaving the stroller up on top and walking them down there, but you're also not walking them down the stairs. So I always do the awkward, like, bump down the hill into the parking lot.
And now we know who suggested a slide.
To me, the only way you get around that.
One more time.
She outed herself.
It's right where the corner is here. Is you take out that parking space and you put either a ramp on this side of it, or where the staircase is at the other end of it, you have to put a ramp there, one of the two. And I don't know, to do a ramp at the other one back towards the bridge, you'd have to go back and forth.
That'd be steeper.
You'd have to do the back and forth thing with it, which I don't know that that's practical
You
there.
don't have the room.
I think talking this through with the property owner and, expressing that it would make it easier for people to be patrons of the stores that they would like to keep all leased up, that we could probably come up with some type of deal there.
That was also incorporating a larger holistic part too. One of the parts that Steve Hieronymus always said, the only way you go in is he would have to ride his wheelchair in the car entrance. And that's just not a community that we need to be. So if we can figure that out, it makes it more accessible for the moms in the strollers, the people in wheelchairs.
Coming down to Panera is the same way. You walk
Yep.
down the Wilson Street Hill, and then you have to go
true.
all the way to the curb cut to go past Walgreens to get to Panera, and it's annoying. Or if you're my husband, you just take the stroller down the stairs, which
Yeah,
What
but
we
you
do.
can't do that in a wheelchair.
That's
what we do.
Here we have an example of some more stairs. And while one could go all the way around to the other side of the building. It would be nice if we could find a way to make this side of the library accessible as well, because there's a lovely sculpture garden right at the top of those stairs that
The
people
ramp
could
halfway
enjoy.
up the hill.
Yeah,
I
you
think
can't.
There's a ramp
can't
halfway up
get
the
in
hill.
back there.
What?
You can't get into the library from the back. You still have to go this way and then
up
Right.
the
Up the parking lot, too.
You can't get in from the backside, but you can get onto the property
right.
halfway up the hill.
So we're gonna
the-
sit
the
down with the
library-
library and talk about it
The
and
library
see
would have to do something as well.
what we can do. What's that?
Probably.
That is on that.
It-
Yeah, we rang the doorbell. There's a doorbell at the door back there. We rang it in the middle of our documentary.
Yes.
We didn't have the cameras rolling, but we had a photographer there, and they were not happy with us. And before the end of the documentary shoot, I had an email from Laura about why we were ringing the doorbell at the
Yeah.
library, because there is a door, but you just can't use it.
Right.
Well, you can, but.
You can.
Why they have
Nobody answers it. You
I
can
think
use
it's
it.
a security issue for the library that they don't have
They don't have a desk
personnel
down there. Yeah.
to have a
So it's
desk
on their
to be
radar.
able to watch.
I know that they've brought it up at a board meeting.
But they put a doorbell on there. So.
Do not press.
It might be for employees. Who knows why.
There's a handicap seat,
Just saying.
but not stroller.
So my next slide is kind of a statement that we just don't really have enough bike parking downtown. So one of the things that we could look at is underutilized parking spaces, although we need to balance the availability of that space with making sure that it's going to be safe for people to use. So that's just, we need to examine it from that standpoint. But a lot of times I will see people who are going to Limestone and they dismount their bikes, and even though there is parking around the corner on Shumway, they're still kind of looking around and they're like, oh, this store next door isn't occupied, so we'll just park our bikes over there and go in, or leave them out front in front of Limestone. Even though there is bicycle parking, it's kind of like Art Stop. It's there, but it's just not in its most convenient place. So we need to be mindful
Didn't we
of
talk about
that.
that a few weeks ago, where we kind of just said, if we remove one strategic spot, that's one car that might have been there, but you could have up 15 bikes.
Right.
So
It's a safety issue. I mean, I think we're supportive of, but losing one car space from an economic standpoint and being able to park 10 bikes there makes total sense. But if it's not safe, then we shouldn't do it. But so that we just need to examine it from that standpoint. And I know there's plenty of cities that do it.
Yeah, they do.
You can make it safe.
Yeah, you basically extend the bump out,
Yep.
and then that becomes a bike parking spot.
What a bollards.
Bollards break. I think this is like one of the things we ran into with closing
There is a bump.
North River Street.
You'd extend it further.
The Point, which is goes around River Rain, north of the Riverwalk. The problem is, and I see this a lot, I see people riding their bike through the area that is the Point. And I don't know if they see the signs, because if you look at this picture, there is quite a large sign before you get to that walking bridge there that says, please walk, bike. And so the only solution that we came up with there is that we need better signage in that area to make sure that people follow it and or speak up when we see people who are biking there.
We have to think about our branding project as City of Signs instead of City of Energy.
Yeah, there is a wayfinding project. This is actually called the Walking, Bicycling, and Wayfinding Group. So,
Maybe spike strips instead.
Water Street from Houston to Union Street. Again, this is a prime area for Sharrows. There are many bicyclists that use that to connect from the north side of the west bike path to the south. And then there were just a couple of additional suggestions, which were riverfront trail beautification. One of the ways that we're looking to do that is with our stream bank stabilization. And then also in the South Plaza of City Hall would make a great place for some wayfinding signage for the many bicyclists who pause there to tell about the great things there are to do in our downtown.
It's Park District, though, isn't it?
It's the Park District, but we all work together. The partnership.
It's a big windmill.
The big windmill. Does anybody have any questions? I have a lot of notes that I took about things to follow up on, some areas where we need to schedule a focused discussion simply on one issue. So I really appreciate the opportunity. I know it was a lot of information, and I thank you for your
Can you send
patience.
this to all of us?
Absolutely. What I will do is I will put it on OneDrive.
There you go. Awesome.
Can we just do that? I mean, they make pre-made stencils for please dismount your bike. We just,
Oh, we're already sourcing it.
Okay,
Yep. We are in a race to do that before the leaves fall, because the same people who use the stencils to paint nice things on our streets are the same ones who will be trying to pick those leaves up in between storms.
Okay. Anybody else have any other comments? If not,
Alan, I would just generally say I'm very pleased with the strategic plan in general. We as a group, I could say, we see that there's progress being made.
Excellent.
And
I'm
there's
happy
great
to hear
momentum
that.
behind that, so thank you to the staff for that.
Terrific. Thank you.
and thank you for hosting these meetings and inviting us all to do it. This was great, and this presentation of the visuals was so organized and
Awesome. Thank you.
okay. Now we'll move on to project status.
Was there anything that you didn't hear yesterday that you want to hear about today?
Any update on the third ward?
Well, and fourth
Yes.
and fifth.
What?
And fourth and fifth, if you
Oh,
include the.
yeah, that's true.
And
maybe even in the
Geneva, if
second.
you include it. I have been talking to my counterpart in Geneva and making sure that she is aware of any news that I hear. I did not hear from the Illinois Department of Public Health today either. However, just before coming to this meeting, there were several news stories that the IDPH is now focused on a new potential source for the Legionella bacterium coming from the power wash spraying that's being done on the Fabian Parkway roadway project as the possible source. You know, big tankers full of water, old tankers full of water. They are, you know, on a hot, sunny day, it makes for a pretty good environment for bacteria to grow. It's not confirmed. It is a suspicion at this point, and they're investigating that. But I also do want to point out that the water in those trucks was not, they're not filled from any Batavia water supply. And we still have no cause for concern that our water supply is in any way compromised by this situation. So we have no indications that drinking water or potable water that you are using is in any way dangerous. Alderman Chanzik.
If the state does not return a telephone call by tomorrow, we probably as electeds should have a list of each person we're supposed to contact. Because my understanding when we went down there is every time they get a call from an elected, if they get a call from 14 of us saying there are 40,000 cars a day that travel past that intersection,
Right.
I'm one of those people. This could be a lot bigger of a deal. And not to sound alarmist, but we're going to get to that place if they don't start answering questions, because there comes the conspiracy theorist thing that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they're not talking. This could be something really bad. So they need to answer our questions by tomorrow, or please let us know who we need to contact.
Understood.
We need
Please.
to contact the news media and have them tell us.
Oh, they're already here.
Well, but they're finding out before we do. They should call us before they break.
And that is problematic.
It is, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions on projects? Okay, then we'll
Right.
move on to others. Does anybody have any others tonight? If no others, we will go then directly to executive session for collective bargaining. I have a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion by O'Brien, second by Salvati. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Me? Okay. Thank you.
You don't even have anybody taking notes tonight.
I am. I'm right here. I got the list.
Be able to read that chicken scratch.